Hello students, in Chapter 3 we are introduced to the demand and supply models. These are going to be functions that we will graph and we can put them together to understand why prices are what they are in markets. So if we're going to think about a market-based economy, we can definitely go back to our circular flow model to get a sense of what's going on here. So remember that our two sets of economic actors are households and firms. We have two different types of markets. There are the resource or the factor markets, and there are the product markets. And then the households and firms are related to each other through these two sets of markets. So we will be looking at labor markets in Chapter 4, and that'll be this side over here, because that's where the land, the labor, the capital, the entrepreneurship is supplied by households to the firms so that they can purchase or hire the inputs that they need for their factors of production. And then in Chapter 3, though, as we learn about supply and demand, we will be focused over here on the product markets, where the firms are producing the output and supplying to the market, and the households are purchasing. So these are the goods and services that individuals are purchasing from firms. So the households are the demanders. So if I want to think about supply and demand, then over here, the households are supplying and the firms are demanding. But on the other side, in the product markets, the firms are supplying the outputs and the households are demanding. So our relationship with each other is different depending on which set of markets we're talking about. Now, of course, households would like to bring in as much money income as they can. That will improve their budget and allow them to spend more money on goods and services. So in a sense, households and firms are at odds with each other. Households want a lot of income and want to pay low prices for things, but it's what we pay for things that becomes the revenues of the firms. So firms want to charge high prices, but they want to pay low wages because that's their costs of production. And for firms, their profits are going to be generated when the revenues exceed the costs. And the conflicting goals of the households and the firms will be revealed when we look at demand and supply curves, because they will kind of move in opposite directions. If you think about it, when a good can be sold for a higher price, the suppliers are interested in selling more of it, but when it can be purchased at a lower price, the consumers would be interested in consuming more of it. So the price relationship with the quantity supplied and the quantity being demanded is going to be what is revealed in the supply and demand schedules or the supply and demand curves. So what does a demand schedule look like? We'll cover demand first, then supply. So what does a demand schedule look like? Well, it's literally just a table, and it shows the relationship between different prices, a series of prices, and the number of units or the quantity that consumers are willing and able to buy at those prices. So for example, if this is how many cups of coffee I'm going to drink in a week or what have you, if the price is $8 a cup, I'm only interested in buying one. But if it drops down to $6, I would be interested in 3. $4, I want 5. And if it's down to $2, I would want 7. So notice that as the price drops, the quantity demanded increases. So price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. You would not say that demand goes up. That means something completely different. It's the quantity that's rising as the price is falling. All right, this is actually referred to as the law of demand. The law of demand says that as the price of a good goes up, the quantity goes down, or as the price of a good goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. Ceteris paribus. This is a Latin phrase, and it means holding everything else constant that could be affecting my level of demand. For example, my income, my tastes or my preferences, the prices of other goods that are related to this one. So the idea that price goes down, quantity demanded goes up is kind of in a vacuum where all those other factors are being held constant. Now, of course, in the real world, they're not always held constant. In fact, if the price of coffee is going down, it's very possible the price of something else is going up or going down, maybe cream or tea or something like that. And it's very possible my income is changing. So when these other factors do change, we call them demand shifters. Like if my income goes up and I want to buy more coffee at every price, how would I show that? Well, I would pretty much get rid of this table and I would have a new one. So now at a price of $8, maybe I'd want 2. At a price of $6, maybe I'd want 4. At a price of $4, maybe I'd want 6. And at a price of $2, I'd want 8. So notice that all of my quantities are different at each price. This would be called an increase in demand because the amount that I'm willing and able to buy has gotten larger at every price. So we would call this demand schedule number 2. And notice that it is shifted to the right. If it's a shift to the right, that's called an increase in demand. That's different from the price going down and the quantity demanded going up. An increase in demand means the whole schedule has changed and the curve has shifted. So we'll want to make sure we pay attention to that vocabulary. Now you might ask, why in the world are we so certain that the demand curve is downward sloping like this, that there's this inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, that we are willing and able to say that it's the law of demand. So if it's a law, that means we believe it always holds. And there's really 3 reasons. They are the income effect, the substitution effect, and the law of diminishing marginal utility. So we'll talk about those more in class. The supply schedule and supply curve are thinking about it from the firm's perspective. Notice here that as the price drops, firms are willing to supply less. The quantity supplied is going to go down. And the reason is because they are not that interested in selling this item. They'd rather sell something else that will generate higher profits. So now there's a direct relationship. The other way to think of it is price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. And notice we would move along this supply curve in an upward fashion as the price rises, because firms are now incentivized to sell more of this good. That direct relationship we call the law of supply. It assumes the only thing that's changing is the price of the good. Everything else is being held constant. So that ceteris paribus phrase applies here as well. But we will see that there are 5 things that shift the supply curve. For example, like an improvement in technology or an increase in production costs. Obviously, if it costs more to produce this good, my willingness to supply it's going to go down. And a shift to the left would be a decrease in supply. And I can show that to you here. Again, I can say, well, if it costs more to make this good, then I'm not willing to produce that many units. Maybe it's only 80, 60, 40, 20 now. So all of those points now would graph out this way. Notice this is a shift to the left. So decreases in supply or demand are leftward shifts, while increases are rightward shifts. All right, I'll leave it there. I do have another video I'd like you to watch to help solidify these concepts. And then in class on Thursday, we will go over the last 2 sections of the chapter on equilibrium and price controls from the government. Let me know if you have any questions.